This is day 239 of Ukraine's resistance. We're at Mediacenter Ukraine. My name is Vasily Samokhvalov. We're starting our next briefing, and with us are four guests. We are about to have four very important guests. Andriy Hodek, First Deputy of the Regional Ministry of Administration, Roman Ivantsiv, Chief Technology Officer of Lvivoblenergo, Petro Chornopyskyi, Director of the Western Territorial Directorate of the Grid Maintenance of Ukrenergo, and Vitaly Fedun, Main Dispatcher of Ukrenergo. We'll be discussing energy power supply during the war. And I would like to first give the floor to Pan Andriy, who will perhaps give us a few words on how the authorities and the energy sector have spent the past 2 weeks. Hello, everyone. Before we get into more detail about what the next few days and the nearest 2 months perhaps will mean in terms of power supply, I would like to publicly thank the representatives of the Lvivoblenergo, Lviv regional energy company for the titanical work that they've done in terms of renewing a power supply that was stopped due to the missile attacks on Lviv on the 10th and 11th of October. Thank you so much for the speed and professional nature of your response. At the same time, missile strikes on energy objects persist, are now in their second week. We're getting strikes almost every day. They're localized quite widely, but they're aiming at the same thing. The objective is to create the worst damage in our energy system and disbalance the power supply system. As a result, we see that the energy system is working in very difficult conditions, and it's quite difficult to balance. As a result, we are looking at two possible options two possible developments in the next 2 days. The first possibility is what the president has already said, and representatives of the energy ministry and Ukrenergo company. We need to significantly reduce consumption of electrical power to ensure balance. This is up to each of us. This is really a request to the general public, not to live through the stereotype that like my individual consumption, my individual gadget, my individual appliance doesn't affect the energy situation. It does, because it's the effort of each of us. It's down to each of us by switching off every unnecessary thing, by using appliances only when strictly necessary. We will seriously decrease, and we will each make our little contribution to our balancing our energy system and our energy security. We've been working together with the local authorities, and we've made some progress in terms of decreasing consumption among communal services, different street lights, lighting of communal properties. This decreases consumption in this sector. However, we don't fully understand the stance of the businesses. The businesses aren't fully listening to us yet. We see, among other things, in walking through the central part of town, or even driving by the central part of town, we see in the peak hours that we so often mention for the past 2 weeks, especially up to 11 o'clock at night, the city is extremely well lit with outside lighting, even in spite of the fact that the establishments are basically closed and no longer working. I would like to especially address the trade centers and the malls. I understand that business and trade have to continue and function, but the compromise solution in terms of decreasing consumption, increasing in trade, in places of trade, can be found if, with these simple steps and simple measures, each in our place, by switching off an appliance, by making a company work at night. If we don't decrease consumption of power in the nearest few days, we will have to resort to step number 2, which is reducing consumption and possible temporary switching off of power, both for the broader public and for various entities. We really hope that we can find a compromise solution and we won't have to resort to these more radical steps. We won't have to resort to power cuts. So again, we ask you to please, we urge you to please be responsible in your consumption of power, of appliances, and please form your schedule, form your agenda, plan your day around diminishing consumption. One of the reasons for the change of the curfew, it was basically extended. It went from 11 p.m. to 12 p.m. is ensuring companies that plan to work at night, planning to let the employees get to their places of work without violating curfew and without consequences that precede thence. So in these small steps, I really hope that we can reach a result that will allow us to hold the line across the energy front and the energy sector. Thank you, Pan Andriy. I think we'll give the floor now to Vitaly Fedun, a main dispatcher of Ukrenergo, who will perhaps explain us what is going on so that every citizen understands. Hello, everyone. Considering that unfortunately attacks on critical infrastructures persist, including power plants, there is a deficit of electrical power. So in order to balance the energy system in Ukraine, in order for us not to develop this crisis into a full blackout, we are reduced to using, particularly right now, from 7 to 10 p.m., we have to restrict power. Again, not cutting, but restricting industrial users. So far, this is the 20th and the 21st. We have these schedules. They are agreed with the consumers and with the administrations, and they have to restrict themselves by that amount of power. We really hope that this will allow us, for now, in these critical 2 days, to stabilize the situation and get through these days without rotating power cuts, which we in Ukraine call them schedules for emergency cuts. This means cutting cutting power for the public, which we haven't introduced, and we hope that we will not introduce, at least not in the nearest future. But eventually, colleagues from the Oblenergo, from the regional company, will add that the schedules will be such. If such schedules are introduced, the public will not be switched off for more than 4 hours, so that life can be comfortable and optimal in those sites. I'm sure you'll find your streets, I'm sure you'll find your hours, but right now we're not doing this. As of right now, we're not using this. As far as Andriy Mikhailovich said, I want to support his message and say again that yes, our lives, in terms of any kind of special usage of appliances, we have to switch. We have to switch to, if we want to use any particular appliances, we have to switch to using them between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. I've made this kind of visual so that it's understandable. I'm sorry, sir. I have a request. Do you mind lifting it, and we'll simply and just keep it in place, and the camera can, the operators will try to. So this is what the typical consumption looks, but industrially and by the public. This is energy. This is the time. So this axis, when the public goes to bed, it drops. Then there's a morning peak and then an evening peak. The amount of energy that we lack due to deficit has to be consumed at night when there's enough. So this is why this consumption, we have to even out this consumption, and the amount of power that we lack, if we consume it at night wherever possible, we will forego any kind of critical cuts We will all together maintain our energy. We'll hold the line. We'll maintain our energy system in a reliable, balanced operation. As an example from everyday life, let's say you have butter and a slice of bread. You can use the amount of butter for one slice of bread or for 10 slices of bread. Let's plan for 10 slices of bread, and then we can all eat. Right, a wonderful comparison. Okay, so let's maybe give the floor to Roman Ivantsiv, representative of Lvivoblenergo, the original energy country. Hello, we've used all the possible power supplies and we've continued to supply power, but as attacks continue, we have to balance our energy system, as my colleague has said before. This is why we've introduced limited consumption schedules and limited power. I will not continue because this has all been already said. I will try not to be redundant, but we've developed schedules for emergency cuts. All the information can be found on our website. It will be indicated. All of this will be said. The schedules and the streets and the localities where the power will be cut in case of critical emergencies. I don't really have anything to add. That's just a brief addition. Everything else will be decided according to the situation. Thank you. We'll probably have questions, but I would like to give the floor for now for our fourth speaker from Ukrenergo, Mr. Chornopyskyi. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about how many people were involved, how many crews in liquidating all of the consequences of the missile strikes that we've had. Hello, everyone. Yes, after these missile attacks, we've had significant damage of many of the objects of the energy infrastructure, power infrastructure, and as of right now, we have repaired, reestablished what was possible, and today I want you to understand this. The situation is under control. We have this under control. The situation is not easy, but it is under control. And all of these measures that have been presented by previous speakers, they're only aimed at preserving the ability to work for our energy system all over the country. The objects, I will not stress which objects have been damaged. It's not really interesting. Perhaps someone might be interested. So, which is exactly why I won't stress. So, as far as the crews involved, we brought in every necessary force, all the necessary forces and means. I want to stress publicly, yes, we have the full support of the state authorities, for which we are very grateful, because no one was prepared for this situation. And this is the kind of thing that you have to prepare to for years. Of course, we were preparing since the start of the war. We were looking into possibilities of such things, but you can't predict everything. I assure everyone that the local organization, we are doing our level best to repair the structure in the shortest possible terms and reestablish supply to the consumer. Again, ever since these cuts started, we've started getting calls, the various letters, please bring back power, our technologies are suffering. We understand all of this. It's not realistic for this to be done at the same time in all the objects. So these appeals together will overcome all the difficulties. Thank you very much. Thank you. If there are any questions, please raise your hands. And yes, hello, my name is Christina Shenko of PrJSC Inter. A question for Mr. Andriy Hodek. You mentioned businesses that as we can see, are still living in a pre-war reality. They haven't turned off the lights and are not economizing. What will you do? Will there be sanctions? Will there be conversations? Will there be consequences? Because I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's logical. Even this building, there's external illumination turned on. I mean, in the middle of the day, right? Thank you. As far as things that we can regulate that don't affect economic activity, Today, by the end of the day, we'll prepare, and we might even have an order by the head of the military regional administration in terms of limiting, restricting external lighting, external advertising, particularly after the work, the conclusion of the work for the day, and in any case during the curfew. On the other hand, as we've said, the fact that the companies have not been listening to us, well, this can be proven by specific numbers. Unfortunately, neither from the 10th nor from the 11th, and not since then, since we've seen the general consumption in the region, it hasn't dropped. There hasn't been a drop in consumption. We're also planning a meeting tomorrow. We are considering the circumstances of the wartime. This will probably be on Zoom with various associations, because this is exactly how we can reach the widest circle of economic subjects and operators who are really the biggest consumers of electrical power. We'll be talking about a general algorithm on the one hand, we need the business to understand whose consumption will be restricted, according to what principles, and how the authorities can help businesses reorganize their production processes to work at night wherever possible, thus balancing the peak stresses that the representative of Ukrenergo showed us. Thank you. Next question, please. Hello, Marichko Kuzik, 1+1, 1+1. I see that in Yavoriv they're starting planned cuts of power. So for consumers, we're seeing this. Is this already being used, according to what I'm saying? And the second question is, you're saying that the Lviv region is not saving power. Recently, Maksym Kozytskyi said that there's a 10% drop. So what's the truth? What's the true picture? May. Yes. Thank you for the question. Okay. There are no schedules for cutting power for consumers. We haven't introduced anything. So right now we have schedules for reducing consumption. Right now, for instance, let's say a company was using 1 megawatt. In order for the energy system to persist according to schedules, now they have to cut it down to 500 or 600 kilowatts. In this way, we'll support both our economic and our energy front. We haven't switched off any consumers. If such cuts happen, you will see this all through our site and through our press center, our press service. Thank you. But what about Yavoriv? Perhaps there is some kind of emergency in Yavoriv. I'm sure that there will be work at re-establishing supply. Also, information can be found in our call center or a chat bot. Wherever you are registered, a text will come why the power has been cut, why specifically you might not have power at a particular moment. Sorry, just a clarification. Ola Iwaszczuk, Suspilne. Could you clarify about the companies? Are we talking about private companies? And you say curfews have even been changed so that employees might get there. So is this a recommendation or is this a requirement? How many such companies that will be working at night? Are there any numbers? Could you give us a bit more specifics? So I'll just address perhaps your colleague's question first. Yes. In some hours, on some days, there have been drops in consumption. If we take the analogous time period before the 10th. At the same time, if we're analyzing the situation starting from the 11th until now, the general consumption in the region over the same number of days has not decreased, unfortunately. In terms of companies, there have been no restrictions. If we're talking about specifically business, all of the companies, this applies to all of the companies. Look, it's very difficult it's hard to say that this will be imperative of us, because we have to look into every company's production model. So our job is, together with associations, is to reach everyone and to understand how the authorities can help these companies decrease their consumption, because every company has their nuances. Some people are objectively able to do this, others aren't. So I want to assure everyone that, first of all, the critical infrastructure objects will definitely be prioritized in terms of power supply. Business has to take steps towards that, and I'm sure we'll find a compromise. Thank you. Are there more questions from the room? Yes, another one. Let me take another question, and then we'll be wrapping up. Святослав Дробчук, Перший Західний, First Western TV channel. Sorry, question to the last speaker. I'm sorry. President Zelensky recently announced or said that 30% of electrical plants have been destroyed in Ukraine. What number of these have been destroyed in Lviv? No, if the president says this, we have to trust the president. But as far as the percentage, does it matter right now? In this moment, we know the percentage, but I mean, I'm not prepared. I don't think it's necessary to voice this right now. The important thing is that even the fact that the things that have been destroyed, we had a mass attack on the 10th, on the 11th, on the 10th. But by the 10th in the evening, almost everyone had power, right? I mean, we continued. All of the fountains were working, all of the, and I'm a little bit surprised by questions of this type, like the restrictions. A restriction is a restriction. We're doing what our colleagues said in order to not black out completely. So it's just a request for you. Please convey this message to everyone that this is a forced measure, and we have to do this, because if we don't, then the situation will spiral out of control. Right now, as of right now, the situation is under control, and we will be fine. They will not overcome us. I wanted to answer the question by 1+1. Yavoriv, there were works, and yes, there were cuts, and I think the power is back online. And I have perhaps a final question from myself. I read that we have survived this attack. First of all, because these grids were built when people thought that there might be different situations, and there has been that kind of backup. But maybe that it's important to convey the message also that the problem is not the supply, but the management of the power. Maybe this is the thought that we need to convey. You're correct. There has been some wiggle room, but we survived and will continue to survive because of the work of the energy sector. Because people are working. Perhaps this is not sensed here, because people are working round the clock, through the night, without weekends or holidays. I think this is more important than whatever resilience the Soviet equipment had. Yes. So every energy system in every country has some wiggle room in order to have resiliency in the face of different situations, unplanned situations, emergency situations. I thank all of the energy colleagues in the energy sectors, our employees, of Ukrenergo, of the authorities, local and regional authorities, for standing with us and for helping us liquidate all of the damage. But let us get accustomed to living in the reality we are in now. Our country is right now living in two realities, one on the front line, one sort of in Lviv, so to speak. We have to support all the people who are fighting, and we have to also balance the energy system in order to support the economic processes to help the front. Thank you. I would like to thank all of our speakers. We'll wrap up on this. At 2 o'clock, we'll have a panel discussion here, and we will continue our briefings tomorrow.